As the 16-bit era advanced, we were having difficulty getting our games distributed. We'd always relied on getting into distributors to go to WH Smiths and that kind of thing. That was how we sold our games. And we sold some mail order, obviously, but most of them at retail. I loved Robotron, so I'd been working on the Llamasoft style Robotron game. And as I was getting fairly near to completion, I felt it was quite a decent game. And I rang around a few places seeing if they'd be interested in publishing it, and nobody was really interested in it. There wasn't really any market for my type of games. This fun scene that we'd started out in it wasn't like it was disappearing, but it was mutating into something else. It started getting more commercial, and then you had like arcade licenses became more prevalent than film licenses, and then you needed to have more marketing to get into the magazines, and then the distributors would only take you if you had so much of an ad spend every month. And it seemed to me that if you wanted to stay in that scene, then you had to become something other than what you'd been before. And I didn't want to become something other than what I was. And I think I was just being stubborn, basically. I didn't want to give it up. So I'd heard of this thing called shareware. In the early days, shareware was very pure. You actually gave the software away complete, and people paid you if they were getting the value out of it. And I just thought, why don't I try doing that? I got in touch with SD Format, and they said they'd put Llamatron on their cover disc. And so I wrote this famous text file which I put on the disc, where I basically explained the concept. Here is the full copy of Llamatron. If you like it, then pay us a £5, which was also considerably lower than the price of software, which was about 15–20 quid for a game in those days. And we'll give you a copy of Andy's Attack as well. We weren't the first people to do it by any stretch. It was being done quite a lot earlier in the US, and there were certainly other people doing it in the UK. But I think we were one of the first to be seen to be doing it. Llamatron was probably the real breakthrough game where I actually managed to get a degree of mass appeal.
That was a big stepping stone for me in terms of understanding what motivated Jeff and his kind of genius in video game development, really.
Even if you had seen Robotron, I don't think I would have put the two quite together, you know what I mean? Because Jeff had totally done something unique with it.
Robotron was a ruthless arcade game, and I wanted to make a game that was kind of Robotron-y but was more accessible. The main thing I did was to give the option for the player to have this little droid which followed you around and helped you. A little AI droid would go around and shoot things for you and collect beasties for you and actually really genuinely usefully help you out. And it made that game a lot more accessible to a lot more people, without needing the absolute mad skills that you need to do Robotron itself.
Looking at an enemy and going, hang on a minute, am I being chased by an umbrella? And do I have to catch that to make it stop raining? That makes sense, but it wouldn't exist in any other game. But somehow, in the games that Jeff writes, that logic just kind of clicks into place and you go, aha, yes, get umbrella, that stops the rain is bad, the umbrella is sentient, that's fine, now I'm going to go after this telephone.
But if it was just like a load of things being thrown at you, there wouldn't be a lot of entertainment in that. And actually, I'd say Revenge is a little bit like that. Llamatron itself is great in that those things move in specific ways. They've got predictable ways of moving. They're not just things bobbing about. Like items in the game will have their own like behaviours and characteristics as well.
It's just so fun and so ridiculous, yet somehow completely and utterly makes sense within its own world.
It's a nice blend of Jeff Minter and Robotron, so it's just this beautiful mix.
And people absolutely love that. People loved the fact that we trusted them to take this game and they could basically test it for themselves. And they loved the game and they sent us money. And it was a time when we weren't making a lot of money, so it really did save our ass at that point. And it was quite moving because loads of people, as well as sending money, they sent letters telling us how much they appreciated it, how much they loved it. And at one point, there was a point when this was all kicking off, I was living in Cumkeek and I had a fax machine, and my fax machine every day would just go with rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls of faxes of my mum just faxing me these letters that were coming in, of people just expressing their joy at having been trusted to pay for this game only if they liked it. And even though people sent me more money than I asked for because they thought I deserved it. It was lovely. It was, from going through banging your head against the wall with recalcitrant distributors to this outpouring of love was extraordinary.
I think Jeff has a fascinating history with Atari.
There's no escaping the fact that Atari have been an incredibly important part of Jeff's career. I mean, obviously Jeff has a huge soft spot for Tempest.
It's sort of about those glowing analogue colour vectors that's just absolutely stunningly beautiful, especially when compared to the other artwork of the raster artwork of the day. It was crude and blocky and not very satisfying to look at. This thing just was a thing of beauty in and of itself, and it made a deep impression on me. Tempest was a game which never really made it over to the home systems of the day. You could have Donkey Kong and Space Invaders and all the rest, Pac-Man, all those made it out, but Tempest was something special that never actually made it through.
When he had the opportunity to work with Atari and they said, who wants to make the next Tempest game? I mean, I'm assuming he was just there at the meeting just going, me.
I was at a stage where I had a pretty friendly relationship with Atari in the UK and in the US really, and doing some stuff on the ST that got me into the Jaguar on the ground floor really. I went to a Jaguar DevCon and then got developers to come along and hear about it. They said, we've got various IP we'd like put onto the Jaguar. We'll read out some names if you're interested, stick your hand up. And they said Tempest. I thought, Tempest? I stuck my hand up. At that point, I'd never done any 3D stuff either. I'd never done any vector stuff, I'd never done any polygon stuff, so I was actually a bit scared doing it. I thought, because I don't actually know how to do any of the things that you need to be able to do to make that game. But I was able to get enough together to be able to do this game reasonably well. I got the basic Tempest working on that and was just doing outlines. My producer was trying to edge me towards doing solid graphics, and for a while I didn't want to do that. I thought I'd rather have a higher frame rate and keep the wireframes. But he was quite correct. He pushed me towards doing the filled polygon stuff. I had to admit, when I put the filled polygon stuff in, it did look a lot better.
I think Tempest 2000, there's a lot of firsts in there for him that have stuck with him that are characteristics and signatures of his style. And technical stuff like feedback.
I discovered the visual feedback effect I had in Tempest 2000. Quite by accident, one Monday morning, just I'm getting up sitting at my breakfast table and thinking, what would happen if I plugged the output of the blitter back into itself? and came up with this lovely sort of feedback. I then spent the next 2 days playing about with this game. Whoa, this is amazing, this is really trippy.
He managed to make certain aspects of that game look organic rather than digital, and like dynamic rather than just like static. It wasn't a bunch of 2D sprites flipping through frames, it was like an algorithmic expression of math up on the screen. And those things are new to me. Those things are consistent to his work ever since. That's a key part of what he does, making math beautiful.
I was invited to the launch of the Jaguar in New York. Towards the end of the evening, I was hanging out with one of the main system architects of the Jaguar. And he started telling me how he thought Tempest wasn't very good. He said it really didn't show the potential of the Jaguar. He said Atari only really have it on their list as like a make-weight game. It's not going to amount to anything. It's a bit rubbish, you know. You know, the designer of the Jaguar is slagging off my game, and we don't like that. And then it came time to go out for final test. I can't remember which show they were coming home from, but they said Tempest 2000 won Best in Show at some big exhibition. I went, what? And I thought Atari really didn't think that much of it, and then suddenly it was like, wow, yeah, actually they seem to be really liking it. And yeah, so then it came out on the Jaguar and people didn't hate it.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Nobody can do Tempest better than Jeff.
Tempest 2000, that was the flagship game. That was the killer app. Like, if you had a Jaguar, you had to have Tempest 2000.
When I got that game, I literally just played it for weeks and weeks and weeks and fell in love with it. And having things like the helper drone as sort of like a slightly easier mode to ease you into the gameplay means that you can kind of explore what it is about this game without really needing a huge amount of instruction. It just basically is the perfect thing to create a game that is very addictive, very rewarding without being too tough but still incredibly challenging.
Super Zapper Recharge.
Jeff took the idea of Tempest and turned it into something that was so much better.
I think for many people, the Atari Jaguar was just a Tempest 2000 machine.
It just was kind of everything you needed for an addictive game in this really amazing sounding looking package. From the point I put this into the Jaguar, that was kind of me gone for a while.
Tempest is the perfect example. And Jeff's curiosity of like, oh, I wonder, what if? And now it's just become like, you know, one of the big stories of his career, one of the big stories of his life.
Jeff obviously is brilliant. Like, he's still doing that thing. He's still doing the games.
People remember Llamasoft and the long history, and people sometimes forget that there are two of us here, and you know, these games aren't just Jeff Minter games anymore. It's Llamasoft, and Llamasoft is the pair of us. But it was getting to the point where you need more than one person to do this stuff, really.
When Giles first came along, it was at exactly the right time. So they'd met and they'd become friends online and got chatting, and obviously realised that there was a lot in common because Giles is, you know, is a complete ninja coder.
One thing we have in common with Jeff, I would say, we have an idea in mind. We both like to see it becoming something tangible, something you can touch it or play with it or feel it. For Jeff, it was mostly software. For me, it's also about hardware.
Giles is almost as eccentric and unique as Jeff is, but in his own special way.
Jeff is the kind of person that can solve things in a way that probably most people would not, using unconventional methods maybe, but he gets things done. I'm much more into maybe a more formal approach about how to solve things.
He's this mad Italian coder who has his own particular strengths, and it seems that they fit together quite nicely.
You know, I think our nerdery is well aligned, if you want to put it that way.
And I think without Giles, there would not be as many Jeff Minter games in the world as there are right now.
Now with Giles, Jeff is developing better technology, and that's given him an ability to stay independent. You can just concentrate on the game. He's probably got a deeper level of thought and understanding of game design than he's ever had. That's something I've got a lot of time for Jeff, in that every single game there's something that's a bit new now and pushes stuff forward.
I like doing light synthy stuff, and we decided that since the light synth was quite versatile and could come up with a lot of cool effects, then why not use this to build games in? I mean, actually have that capability as a starting point for making games. At that time, Space Giraffe was the closest integration I'd done of the light synth and the game. The game was literally sitting inside a visualizer effect for all the levels, and I had a very specific design objective to use the psychedelic visuals in the background as part of the difficulty of the game.
So basically, it started to become, if we were more correct to say, a framework. So we called it the Neon Engine.
What he did is, without getting too nerdy about the technical stuff, he came up with this concept of what you call a virtual machine. And the idea of a virtual machine is a layer of software. I mean, much like, I guess these days you've got things like Unreal Engine or Unity. So you've got a platform where you code to the platform, but then that underneath translates to the hardware it's on.
And it makes my life easier because I just code to the Neon Engine, and he makes sure that it works no matter where it gets deployed. So we had like a subset of it on the Vita, we've got it on the PS4, we've got it on the Xbox One, we've got it on the PC.
He's not created like an engine that just does one thing, he's created an editor that allows him to make very varied things, which is great. It's in Space Giraffe, it's in Grid Runner Revolutions, it's in every game since then as well. That's like the engine of what he makes today, like in a real literal sense as well.
I think this is a continuation of a journey that's been going on for 30, 40 years. There's hardly been a point when Jeff's made a computer game where he's not made a visualizer, and I don't ever want that to stop. You know, and whatever feeds whatever, I don't care as long as Jeff gets to keep making the thing, because they just keep getting better. He's an artist that just gets more and more powerful, you know? There shouldn't be like, oh yeah, you can retire now. There's a new thing, get on it. Yeah, like, job's not done.
The first Jeff Minter game I bought was a game called Abductor. The aliens would swirl in from the top and swoop down, and you had to shoot them. And it reminded me of the arcade games I would play when we were on vacation with the family at the beach, you know, like Space Invaders and Galaga and stuff like that. That had that simple arcade experience that I liked. So I was familiar with Llamasoft and Jeff Minter's name. So when Gridwire came out, I'm like, well, of course, I'm on board for that. And that was the one. That was the game. This game There's something about it that was transformative. This person who made this game understood all the things I loved about arcade games. I played it to death. When I became a filmmaker, I wanted to make a film about video games because the first proper job I had was in video games. I was a video game graphic designer in the mid to late 80s. It would be my first career. I was super nostalgic for it. And the difference between the way it is now and the way it was then, I thought there was a story there. So I cast about for a story. A friend of mine who I used to work with in the games industry said, well, you should do a film about Jeff. Jeff's career spans the history of like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. That's generations of like hardware technology and game development, and like the business has evolved so many times. Jeff could be the constant throughout that story. Each game shows you a snapshot of history at that time, and it's a unique opportunity to show the development of an artist and the development of the medium that he's working in, and encapsulating that in the story of a guy's struggle to get his art out into the world. That was a sketch that I went into production with. What happened through those interviews, something much more compelling to me emerged out of it. I was aware that Jeff had done a light synth. Light synth has been like Jeff's passion project since the early 80s. And then I didn't make the connection at first. So Jeff would have these parties at the farm every weekend at one point, and they were doing this thing with this light synthesizer. One of them would DJ, and they would party all night till the sun came up. And Jeff talked about it in the context of how they became really close friends during this, and it was a magical time that could never be repeated kind of thing. But what he was really telling me was about this project he and his friends developed and presented to Microsoft. A project that would change everything Jeff did for the rest of his career. What they were making was something Jeff would call neon. And neon is something that defines Jeff and the relationship Jeff has with his fans. You know, it meant something. I wanted to find out what that was. Lots of people understand that they feel connected to a musician or a singer. Lots of people feel connected to an actor or a writer. But it's rare to say that people feel connected to a video game designer. And I met a bunch of people who all said it and meant it in a way that was real, in a way that was completely unexpected to me. I think the story of Neon is a story about somebody who never gave up. And I think we all need that.
When I was 13 or maybe younger than that, I can remember lying in the dark, listening to music. And in my head, I would imagine like sort of abstract geometric shapes, sort of doing stuff in time to the music. I was like 14 years old, sitting there daydreaming in my English class. You know, people daydream about being a rock star and playing the guitar on the stage. I was daydreaming about doing something I didn't quite know what, but with big screens with stuff happening on them and lights going off. It's just there as part of my imagination. It's a kind of voluntary synesthesia, maybe you'd call it. And I always wanted one day to make a machine that would let me somehow perform these things that I have in my head and put them out on a screen for other people to see. After I'd been doing video games for a while, I just thought, why don't I try making this light instrument? And that became this 4-player interactive light synth. And that could have been the start of something extraordinary. The main problem was that I could never sell it because nobody knows they want it, and they won't know they want it until they've actually tried it. So in the end, the only way I've been able to develop the techniques is by bringing it into video games.
Jeff's story ends up being kind of like a road trip through video game history, but the road keeps going. I mean, this guy's been around for so long. Aren't you curious to know why?